Okay, I see it, you guys. Did everyone see it?
See anything?
I don't see nothing.
Up. If you go to twitter.com, we've just now tweeted out that we're live on Twitch and on YouTube.
What?
You made it, y'all.
We
We
made it.
did the thing. And we're live on YouTube. I'm going to drop the link. Hi, everyone, if you're here. We're live
Welcome.
on Twitch as well.
Happy Saturday.
We're live on YouTube right now.
Who's here? Hey.
Has anyone ever seen the beginning of a live stream?
The beginning.
Where are we at
Yeah.
on YouTube?
Sometimes it varies.
The link is in the comments. I'll retweet both.
Oh, here he is.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if we're waiting for more time for folks to come in, and then
I got it on YouTube. Okay, we here.
Yeah, I got us on YouTube too.
How are we sounding? If you're watching, please leave us some comments on YouTube or on Twitch, and we'll keep it moving. The only thing, folks, is that this is interesting for us. This is our first time going live. We're kind of speaking to air at this point because we're not sure how we're doing, but this is a learning curve, a learning experience for all of us. So, oh, hi, Casual Grace, aka Grace on the podcast.
I'm noticing I still don't have a green sword. That's all
Look,
I'm
I'm
seeing.
just saying.
That's all I'm seeing.
Listen,
I look so frustrated.
my
Look
brain
at my
is broken.
picture.
I've been doing all types of tech crap. I almost said that other word.
I look frozen and angry. What's going on?
You're always
Hi, Tezrak. Welcome.
Welcome.
not frozen.
Okay,
Hi.
I'm here.
Hi, Byron. If you're on YouTube, hi. If you're on Twitch, hi.
Who's watching what? Because I don't know if I can watch both of these
I'm
chats
going.
at the same
I'm
time.
going to
I'm
YouTube.
engaged.
Mouse
with
Pounder,
YouTube,
thank
folks.
you. Welcome. I'm on Twitch. And so
Hello.
you folks watch
Hi,
YouTube.
Genevieve.
Oh, Jim.
Oh, this is so
Yes,
awesome.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Sonia.
Okay.
Yeah, we getting it. We getting it in.
All right. So I guess we're about 5 after 4.
Yeah, so we should.
We're going to get started on our talks soon. We just want to give time, a little bit more time for folks to come in and get settled. And we're on 2 different platforms right now. If you are trying to get on YouTube from mobile, not going to work. You probably have to head over to Twitch, which is
No, I'm on YouTube on my mobile and it's working.
Really?
fine. Yes.
awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
I was worried about that because, sub limits. It's Juneteenth. It should work for us regardless of how many
Tilly.
subscribers we have.
Hey, people love the L cars. Thank you guys so much for
Oh,
that. You worked
thank
really
you.
hard on that. Yeah. Our
Listen,
girl got it together.
Our girl Tia's been working hard.
She's in operation. She's our
I was like,
chief
guys, I'm free
operations.
now, okay? I can't keep doing all this. Oh, wait, it's Juneteenth. I shouldn't make those jokes. My bad. Oh, sound is pretty okay. Someone
Okay.
says on Twitch, so that's good. If you can hear all 7 of us, we're doing
We're
pretty
doing
well.
fantastic.
We got it. Okay.
All right, so we'll go.
Let's start recording.
Sonia
Kick
from
off.
Pyro Bird.
We can kick this off.
Yeah. So
Are we live
Sorry.
and recording?
yes,
Yes.
there'll be a VOD
Nice.
on Twitch when we finish.
Nice. We're so fancy.
Awesome songs.
You could also watch from our
Right.
website if you're
Yes, we have
interested.
a new website, you guys. blackalertpodcast.com.
It's
Yep.
pretty. Tia's responsible
And-
for that too.
Yeah, and you can find out more about us. You can find all of the episodes there. And just know we have some more things coming to the website as well.
Yep.
We've been
she
working
is killing
hard.
it. She's like a non-incel Geordie LaForge.
Oh,
Oh yeah,
Why
with my
just kick
with
it
my
off like
girlfriend on the
that?
My boy
holodeck, huh?
is
Okay.
That I
and oh my
creep on,
goodness,
you
why
know.
are people
That's how
throwing
we're
this man
going?
under the bus like this?
We're
That
starting
mean,
early.
child is offensive.
I'm not saying
Okay.
LeVar. LeVar's my man. He's the hero
Jordy,
of
but
heroes.
he's not.
But
He's
LeVar,
not.
but Geordie
Jordy
is.
isn't an incel. He didn't create that program just to create it. Okay.
you
Jordy
know.
is straight up an incel. Hold on.
See, we're
We're gonna have to fight
this
about this
Alright,
later.
y'all.
This is not what we're here
engineers, and
for.
I'm
I'm gonna
defend
fight
my
with you
boy.
later about this.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
not
gonna
what
have
we're
to
here
defend
for.
my boy because man,
We're not here for
coming
that.
for his neck.
Right, you already got somebody to
That's
defend.
a
Let's
different-
go. Let's
That's
go.
an episode to come.
Different conversation.
That's a whole that's a whole
Oh,
episode.
cool.
Here we go.
Thanks,
Why
Genevieve.
Jordy is not an incel is an episode.
Hey.
We'll put that another day.
All
So,
right,
Not
so
today.
let's kick it off.
we're gonna kick us off.
Yes.
Welcome to the Black Alert Podcast, your melanated reference for all things Star Trek across all 4 quadrants. Today, the bridge crew, Shaniqua, Marisha, Dre, Travis, Grace, Tia, and I, Raina, will be celebrating Juneteenth by discussing the blackest episode in Star Trek history, Far Beyond the Stars. Yay!
Great episode.
All right.
Yay.
One of the best, I
Okay,
think.
Let's get it.
I
wanna know
watched
how
it.
you-
It's still
why you feel that
fresh.
way.
Okay, so let's discuss what actually Juneteenth is. Juneteenth is short for June 19th. It marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas. Hey, Texas, that's where I'm at.
Texas,
H-Town, Texas.
H-Town.
In 1865, to take control of the state and announce the emancipation of all slaves. The troops' arrival came a full 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, which was January the 1st, 1863. Juneteenth honors the end to slavery in the United States and is considered the longest running African American holiday. Now, as we know, Juneteenth has just been made recently a national federal holiday in the United States. Briefly, let's quickly discuss our thoughts on this being finally recognized in the United States as a holiday.
Uh,
I mean,
I mean,
I'm gonna
on
go
the
with the
surface,
thought that it's a thank you for the outward pour of affection, but that's not what we really wanted.
well,
right?
I think we can get both, right? Here, this is an easy win, a holiday.
Is it?
And then we could still keep
Is it
fighting
weird?
because there are elders who have been pushing for this for
Mhm.
decades,
Mhm.
and they get to see their dream realized here. And so we can have the federal holiday and still be like, hey, voting rights, reforms in education and criminal justice and other matters. I believe we could, no Highlanders.
Yeah, I mean, we
I
can
don't
accept one good thing without thinking that that's where the journey stops, right? Like
Mhm.
like this
Right.
is one step along the way that we're happy and we're celebrating, but at the end of the day, there's still a lot of work to do, and we have to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat. It's like I'll take it, but I want more on my plate because this ain't enough. I want more to eat because there's more to to work towards.
I just think it's exciting for me, as a northerner, because a lot of us until fairly recently didn't pay attention to Juneteenth at all.
Yeah, the funny thing is when I went to college, I went to Grambling State University down in Grambling, Louisiana, and Juneteenth is pretty well known in the South. I'd never heard of it until I got there, and this was back in 2004. I was like, what the heck is Juneteenth?
Mm-hmm.
And I
I
had
was
no clue what it is. And of course, it's for those who don't know, Grambling is an HBCU, historically Black college university, and I had no clue what it was. And being at an HBCU taught me what it was. It was like, oh, it's the day that slaves were actually free, which was well after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by Lincoln. And when I found that out, I was like, wait a minute. It took them how long to make sure we were all free? Because it was rumors in a lot of southern states, in places like Texas, Arkansas, things like that. There were still Black people enslaved. They didn't know. They heard about it. Is it true? And you have the slave owner saying, no, that ain't true. Get back to working. So it took something like this. It took the federal government forcing the hands of these states to say, no, they're free, knock it off, let them go. And yeah, it's been a struggle since, but it's something.
Let's
It's
just say the
something.
Houghton Mifflin books in the North didn't tell us about anything.
They did not.
Okay.
I mean, it's not just I went to college in Texas, and that's not something they celebrated at the college I went to. Granted, I did not go to an HBCU. Yeah, I did a PWI. Yeah, I went to a PWI. So,
or Prairie View A&M.
well, around Prairie View was only like 30 minutes from where I went to school, and that's the only place probably you would have that. But I went to Texas A&M, and we did not have Juneteenth celebrations.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. Yes, I know.
Everybody forgive us.
Well, I mean, being outside of the U.S., Grace, how is that something that even you guys know about?
I mean, like the lone Canadian on the podcast here. Me personally, I didn't learn about Juneteenth until I was in high school, and I only learned about it because I took a Black history class. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have come across my radar outside of me personally looking into it and finding out about it. So it's not really a thing up here. There's no brands talking about Juneteenth this and Juneteenth that. It wasn't a thing, and less of a thing in that, not to say Canada didn't have slavery the way slavery was down in the States. Canada was where the slaves came to be free. So there's no equivalent, and it's not really taught in Canada unless you're taking a specific course that teaches about those things. So it was a while, like I said, I was 16, 17 before I knew what Juneteenth was. And I mean, I could take it upon myself to have a little barbecue on my own, but it's not something up here that, you have family come over, you have the cookout, you put on the clothes, you do the thing. I mean, we have other holidays for that. So, I mean, really, most of this, I'm just going to be, sitting and observing, because a lot of people would say, being as I'm a Canadian, even though I'm Black, I shouldn't even be speaking about Juneteenth. But, I'm here to support and observe.
I think it's an issue of who controls the narrative of history being taught.
Yeah.
I mean, it's becoming ever present that things like Juneteenth, things like the Tulsa, Oklahoma, it's not being taught. When you look at Black history, and we'll get into this with Far Beyond the Stars, it's always the story. Langston Hughes, you see, those prominent people, but you don't see the back end.
And that actually, okay.
We'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Yes. We'll talk about
we get into it.
That leads us to the episode. So I'm going to give a little bit of details about the episode. The episode was actually directed by Avery Brooks.
Ooh, all right.
Steve Oster, he's one of the producers on Deep Space Nine. They had concerns about Avery directing because Avery would be in every single scene. And it is typically very difficult to direct yourself. But because it was a story about racism and prejudice, they felt very strongly that it would be wrong if it came from a bunch of people who didn't necessarily know about that experience. And I really like that point, because that's what Black Alert Podcast is all about. We want to give our experience. We want to give our knowledge about Star Trek from the Black expertise, which I think that's just awesome. So as far as an introduction to the episode, following the loss of USS Cortez and close friend Captain Swafford, Sisko asked, okay, exactly how much more can I take? I don't know how many more friends I can lose. Every time I achieve a real victory, something like this happens and everything seems to turn to ashes. And he starts to question whether he should remain in Starfleet. And that's when he starts to have these visions. He sees Odo as Paths walking around on the ship, and then he sees Michael Dorn or Worf as a baseball player. He faints and he wakes up to Julian saying that they're going to keep him overnight for observation. And that's when we are taken back to the past. So picture it, Harlem, 1953.
Harlem.
And so he's now Benny Russell. He's not Benjamin Sisko. He's a Navy veteran, and he writes for a science fiction pulp magazine. And we are then informed that he and Casey, which is Kira, were told to sleep late as pictures of them were being published of the writers, and they didn't want their public to know that a Black man as well as a woman were writers on the staff. And then Benny, he says, well, what about Richard Wright, Langston Hughes, as Marisha said earlier, Zora Neale Hurston, and they're all mentioned as notable Black writers from the Harlem Renaissance. And in that moment, we kind of get an idea of what Benny is like versus Captain Sisko, where he's starting to speak his mind, speak his voice. So let's discuss, how do we feel about Benny Russell as a character?
He weak.
Is he?
Is he though?
Is he though?
Is he weak, or is he a victim of the circumstances and the times?
Yeah. I don't think it's easy
Benny
for us.
Benny
for
goes
us
along to get along until it affects him.
I don't know. I think it's
though?
Before we get to that, I don't know. I just think it's tough for us in the 21st century to say that anybody who lived, even fictional characters, back then were weak. I mean, everybody had to do what they had to do to live.
I am saying how they wrote Benny, how Benny is written, is the mild-mannered Black person that you want on your team that's not going to put up a fuss.
But he did, though.
Yeah, exactly.
He did.
He had to get pushed, but I mean, that's how a lot of our people were back then. But that's how a lot of our people were back then. Everybody, a lot of folks had to
until
go along
really
to get along.
Affected directly him, he was okay. But soon as it affected him, he went off. But everything else going around, it's okay. I'm a writer. I'm a dreamer.
Because I'm in a similar situation with my job. Okay, I work around a lot of, Vorta and changelings. Okay, so the things that I hear at my job are interesting, and that's me being nice about it. So the way that I have to navigate my workspace isn't necessarily me getting along just to get along, but it's me making sure I keep my job, because I already know something goes wrong. How easy is it for the Black woman to get thrown under the bus? Mm-hmm. So I have to think of the big picture in terms of, how do I protect myself? It's more protection for myself than it is with getting along with, the guys who are around me. So it's really protection and self-preservation a majority of the time. And that's just how we have to constantly navigate, in a society like America, especially back then, when it was way quicker for someone who was Black, who was too outspoken, to have something happen to them. If we think that it's bad now, back then in the 40s, 50s, before the 21st century, it was, I actually can't be too loud. I can't be too vocal, because the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get booted from your job. You're going to get booted out of that space. You're going to have cops called on you. That was just the reality. He couldn't be too overly outspoken.
That wasn't the lens that was given. I would respect that if in his regular life he was respected. In his regular day-to-day life, he was disrespected the whole time, and he never said anything. Dude is pushing up on your girl in your face. In your face. So
he's supposed to fight?
I'm waiting on my chance at bat.
Like
You like,
you
wait,
want him
what?
to
My
fight the
story.
dude in the
It would
middle of the
just fight?
restaurant?
Yeah, I mean, he had.
Cassidy
That's
never
founder.
said it. You said she like, you know, Cassidy wasn't like, oh, whatever his name is in past War,
Lily.
I want
Lily.
you. No,
No,
she was
no.
clear of that. Her
She was-
man was Benny. She
Yeah.
was committed to Benny, and that is what it is.
I mean, they
Benny
don't have to
respected
come
her
to
strength.
blows.
He didn't need to speak up for her.
Until he wanted to keep on writing and not want to buy that restaurant. Yeah, she was committed right till the end.
Hold on. First of all, she
Wait.
was his woman for
Okay.
15 years.
She
3
said
cents a
about-
word. She
time ago.
stuck by him for 15
And
years.
Her struggling black woman. Stay with that
Wait.
man and maybe he'll change his mind.
Marisha, okay, remember when she had the date with Benny at 10, and then Worf was like, what are you doing until 10? And she was like, whatever it is, I ain't doing it with you. So there was a point where
I
she
never
up.
faulted her loyalty to him, but she was disrespectful of his dreams and his wishes because he told her multiple times, I am a writer. I don't want you own her.
This I agree with. This part I agree with.
You
I
can
feel
be
like she
loyal to
was.
someone,
we
but
can-
not respect their boundaries and
Yeah.
hear them.
Okay,
Okay,
but
we
at the
can
same
do that.
time, when you think
I
about
didn't
it,
say she was a thought.
Hold on, why?
I just saying.
I mean, at some point, she's thinking to herself, which is the thought that a lot of people have. At some point, maybe try to do something practical. And I found it to be
15
stra-
years.
Yeah, and that's the other thing.
like,
you've
she
been
wants to
trying
get
do
married
this
and
for
have
some
kids.
years now.
Man.
And it's difficult. And she didn't tell the man, completely give up, you're never gonna make it, I'm done with you. And she didn't and that's the thing, she didn't even give him an ultimatum. She didn't say either do something else or I'm leaving you. It wasn't even that. She was just encouraging him and just saying
Encouraging
this
him to
still
buy that
isn't
restaurant.
really working out.
Encouraging him to buy that restaurant
Okay, you
and
guys-
settle down with her because she didn't put in
Already
15 years.
Okay, hold on. You're going to tell me you would stay with someone for 15 years making 3 cents a word. 3 cents a word. In the 1950s, you trying to start a family, have some kids. She's already been around for a very long time.
So
And
this, if it was what it was. When people show you who they are,
Oh God.
I know you did Maya Angelou me. Like,
She did.
did you just
Girl.
Maya Angelou me?
Girl,
I can't.
Okay, y'all, we gotta
no
listen.
one took Benny seriously.
Okay, so that's your in the
I
comment.
don't agree.
Jake Dynamite. Jake.
No.
You mean-
I think
Okay, we'll get to
That-
that.
Yeah,
Armin
we're gonna do
Shimmerman's
that.
character took Benny seriously.
Yes.
He did.
Superman's character was an ally in general, and that's only because of his religious views.
And so was Kira.
political views.
But so is KC.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but because she's a
True.
woman, the oppressed tend to group together with the oppressed because, you know,
Strength in
I'll
numbers.
Twitch and YouTube in a few seconds.
Just to
I
drop
feel like
in real quick.
having Casey there talking about Me Too diminished what the issue of the story.
No, it
No.
wasn't. No, it wasn't that. It wasn't
That
the
is my
fact that she
view.
was a woman. I'm going to argue something here. The flashes to the future, right? While he's talking to Casey, you see Kira, you see Dukat and Wei Yun and the cops, you see Worf. So the point is, like, okay, here's the character from the future. And those, as well as Wei Yun and Dukat, and you're like, okay, well, this is the same, oppression is oppression. You're looking at aliens and you're thinking, oh, this is divorce from what is going on with Black people in general, whether it be the 90s, because it was the 90s when that episode came out, or the 50s. No, it's the same. Their oppression is oppression is oppression. And here's how I'm giving it to you in a way that you can digest, which is sci-fi.
Yeah.
Like that's all it was. Like the whole woman thing though, I mean, that was fair. That's what it was like for women writers back then. And I don't think it took away from the race issue.
It was intersectionality in a story that was written in the 90s, and that was not something that we saw often at all.
Nope.
So I think that was really actually well done that she saw her own struggle in his struggle and became his ally from that perspective. But just to interject, when he was making 3 cents a word. Benny was writing novellas, which come, at about 40,000 words, which was about $1,200. You could buy a car for that amount of money back then.
So
if he sold his story,
he was doing okay.
All right.
If his story was picked up, that's the thing. He's
up,
freelance essentially.
Yeah, but he'd had other stories picked up, but only stories where that didn't emphasize his black.
Did you see that layout?
Yeah, that's another thing I want to point out.
Did you keep that suit? Benny wasn't struggling.
Benny wasn't struggling.
Was doing all right.
Benny had a whole piano in his apartment. Okay, pianos are expensive now. Can you manage how expensive a piano would have been then?
He probably got it from church, man. Come on.
No.
Benny had money.
Benny was doing okay.
Benny had 15 years. Well, you got to remember, this is Harlem. Okay, I believe they were filming this part.
No, it was
San Francisco. Because Willie played for the Giants.
Yep, it's San Francisco.
Because they're in the restaurant, he's saying people want to know why the Giants
were the New York Giants before they were the San Francisco Giants. And
listen, trust the one from New York. Trust the woman from New York.
Hey, I'm not fighting with no.
All right,
the biggest rival for the Yankees.
I always thought it was San Francisco because the whole thing with the Giants and that Starfleet headquarters. He's a Starfleet officer.
No, it was New York.
It was New York. It was Harlem.
All the jazz is basically telling you this is New York. All the jazz, and then you see the scene where Aaron Eisenberg's character is selling the newspaper. You see Haredi Jews. You see all types of It's definitely New York.
It's definitely New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Giants were here before they moved out west. But
I'm not gonna argue with no New Yorker.
I'm not arguing.
In general, it's kind of a bad idea. They like
New York in 52, and then they moved over. But yeah, anyway. So, let's get back to where we were supposed.
Where we were. Let's get back.
All right. So, Marisha, your stance is that Benny was a weak character or a weak person.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
So we'll get to that a little bit later as well.
Yes, it was NYC. I see that, y'all. Thank you so much. I'm been corrected. My bad.
They getting on you. They getting on you.
The chat is like it's New York drain.
Now,
New York City.
New York City. From upstate. It's a whole different genre. We have Pabst, who is I'm assuming the editor.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
played by Odo. Is he the editor?
He's the editor.
Yeah, the editor of the magazine.
Played by Odo.
He's not the owner of the magazine.
He's not the owner. He's not the publisher.
It was kind of hilarious.
So funny that they chose.
Yeah.
It's funny that they chose him to do that.
I don't think it's funny at all. I think it was very purposeful.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where funny.
You think about the episodes like we saw. I can't remember is it Things Past? I can't remember. From I want to say it was the 6th season where we see Odo when he first comes to the station, and how he was basically doing the bidding of the Cardassians and sent Bajorans to death, who were innocent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that. Like I said, it was funny because it is sort of referencing that episode as well. Like the deliberate choice. Yeah,
Odo is always a tool of authority.
What's fascinating is that in this episode, I'm sorry. I just want to point out that in this episode, everyone that is around Benny has a similar archetype and personality to the people who are on the station around Cisco.
I disagree.
Really?
I disagree.
All right.
How so?
But why? To elaborate?
Elaborate on this disagreement.
My whole issue with this episode is that Avery Brooks is showing the full extent of his character, his talent, his craft. And I felt like the characters surrounding Benny were papier-mâché caricatures of what they think was going down in that time period.
I don't know if that's a fair assessment because, like, you have Avery Brooks.
I gotta come through butter. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna make me some money. Ooh, yeah.
Wait, what?
Okay. Sirach,
get that.
Sirach was over the top. I'm gonna give you that. Like he is definitely playing a particular character. But when you have
More
somebody,
characters. Ooh, look at these ladies.
Girl, if you don't
hit
let
the
me
ball
talk.
for
She gonna cut
when you
you.
have somebody like Avery Brooks, and we're all familiar. That man is a force. That man can act. And when you just let him be in his element, I'm not surprised that everybody else around him looks like paper mache.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well,
Like,
I don't.
How do
I-
you stand up against that, especially with you have actors around him who have not been
talent.
acting as long as Avery Brooks?
That
And-
was his episode.
And like, not only is he the center of this episode, he's directing the episode. Like, I'm not surprised that nobody else looks as good. Yes, it would have been a better episode if the other actors were on that same level. And honestly, if all the other actors were on that same level, I wouldn't be able to watch this episode more than once or twice every couple of years. It would just be too powerful.
Nana Visitor actually said that after they were done filming the scene where he has his breakdown, the entire cast just like thought that, well, they watched him collapse. Like, he put so much of himself into this episode that in the scene when his character collapsed, he collapsed.
That's
I
absolutely
mean,
true.
that episode was he put his heart and soul into that episode, and everybody else didn't. I mean, like that, they didn't have a reason to.
I don't know if I agree with this
you watch
idea though.
What We Left Behind, and if you haven't watched What We Left Behind, you should watch What We Left
For
Behind.
real.
About an hour, I think it's an hour and maybe 10 minutes into the episode, they actually talk about Far Beyond the Stars and that moment where like Avery is just so wrapped up in this character, he literally collapsed. And like the director calls, like the person who's directing the scene called cut, and he's just on the floor. They're surrounding him, looking at him on the floor, and he couldn't get out of the character. That's how much of himself he put into it. Like, how do you performance? Yes, he deserved an
Sure.
Emmy. That's just me, but
Look, this is the other DS9 episode that deserved an Emmy.
Yes.
Because
I'm not asking for competition. I'm asking for. There's. How can I say this?
We can't hear you well, honey.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
a little
I'm
bit
not
better, yeah.
asking for competition. I was asking for support because it doesn't gel all right. Like everything else is pop character, ha ha, he, and Benny is having these seriously intense moments that's supposed to be thought provoking. That's washed away within the next quip, if you will.
Gosh, I didn't
Well,
see that
I
at
don't
all.
know. I don't know if I agree with that. I think
I'll just
the actor. Well, no, I think
Brooks.
Odo, the character that Odo was playing, Paps, Renee Auberjonois was playing. You know, I think that character came across well. The person
Yes,
who is the agent of oppression. I don't want to say unwilling, but the person who just exists in this space and perpetuates this type of problem. I think Armin Shimmerman's character worked.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And
his character.
the only problems I had was maybe the problem, the character played by Colmini, the Miles O'Brien version of the 1950s Miles O'Brien, the 1950s Jadzia Dax.
Yeah.
I think those were the issues. And the 1950s Julian Bashir,
Oh, well,
here's the thing, a person of color.
Who
And
was kind of
there's no-
coded gay.
he was
Yeah.
a little bit, yeah.
and who wasn't really, that wasn't brought up in any, and I understand it's a black episode, so that's more important, but
He was just kind of there.
Yeah.
In all honesty,
He was just
just
there.
kind of in the back. His character was kind of in the background.
with his
taking up space.
I think
yeah, and I think maybe they didn't need everyone, but you know, you paying them for all these episodes, they got to show up,
Yep.
basically.
And each of them
You
was
know.
supposed to be a parallel to, and not a one-to-one, but they were also supposed to be a parallel to a real science fiction author. You've got Benny Russell was a Sam Delaney. You've got Casey was supposed to be like an Ursula K. Le Guin type. I mean, you had O'Brien's character was kind of an Asimov. What's his Quark's character was like a Harlan Ellison. I mean, all of them were supposed to represent some actor, or I'm sorry, some writer from that period. So, some of the character quirks that we saw might have been, intended to represent the people who, they represented.
Okay, I'll give that.
And
we got to move on. We have
screen.
we have like a bunch of questions we're going through. So let's move on to the next one. Pap says that he wishes that things were different, but they're not. And then Benny says, wishes never changed a damn thing. How does that
Not
relate?
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all quiet. There we go.
I mean, it's how long have we been wishing, hoping, praying for change, right? So here we are, 401 years later, since 1619, we've been here. And what do we really have to show for it? Besides a new holiday, which, Juneteenth, Jubilation Day, Freedom Day, whatever you want to call it. It has several names, but we have a month of history. We have where even during Black History Month, Black history still isn't really taught.
It's actually trying to be erased currently.
We can't even get into that. I'm trying to stay PG-13.
well, no. So I have some thoughts about that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think the Langston Hughes references were deliberate. I don't think it had anything to do with the fact that he's a well-known Black author and this is about a Black writer.
Right.
I think it had very much to do. So the book that they showed on the desk is how you know that there's something we're supposed to take from this. And, everyone knows the poem, a Dream Deferred, right? But it comes from a larger work called Montage of a Dream Deferred. And it's about the lives of people in Harlem.
Yeah.
During that time period, and their victories, their losses, the setbacks, and the movement to go forward. And if you remember at the beginning of the episode, Cisco mentions it. We're celebrating victories, and then right after we're talking about, the losses. Mm-hmm. And so that's essentially the story of Black people in the United States. We get ahead, and then we have to go back. And then we have to keep pushing. Yep. And that's what Benny is going through, and that's what Montage of a Dream Deferred is about. And some of the other poems in that book are about how Black people endure.
And I think it's interesting that
have been the only narration, because there was other narrations during that point in time. Not only of Black endurance, but a Black anger, a Black sadness.
Well, yes. We see that.
So we don't get the Claude McKay or Gwendolyn Brooks. We get likable Langston Hughes.
Black writer there
he wasn't likable.
They had to do. With the time that they had, even Avery Brooks himself said that he wished it was a two-parter. So it was a one-part episode, and they had to do with what they had to do. So to me, it's like, okay, we can't name every single Black writer. So they probably went with those that were most notable at the time because they're trying to appeal to the audience.
And remember, there's a second part to this episode.
Yes,
we
get a follow-up in season 7.
And we do get to see a lot of the sadness and just how bleak his existence is at that point. Right. So, this episode may have been the Langston Hughes episode, but later on, we're going to see more dimensions to, the life of a Black writer in the 1950s.
And to me, when I watched this episode, I've always seen Benny as just one voice within what, the whole Black community. He's the voice that is fighting for the change in, the form of, I'm going to push for our stories to be told, where you have Willie, who, he's doing it by
that's a Jake character, right?
Yeah. So I think,
Oh, Worf.
yeah.
Worf.
So when you have
Okay.
when you look at Jimmy, who's Jake Sirach Lofton, and you have Benny, and you have Casey, his girl Cassie, and you have his father, who's the preacher. All of them represent a different aspect and a different voice within the Black community, and how Black people go about trying to push for the change and what our struggles are. You have the person like a Jimmy who's pessimistic and is like, you know what, no matter what it is we do, they're not going to accept us. We're not going to be our equal. So screw it.
Let me
And
go
then you
Costco.
have someone like a Willie, who's more of a realist, and he's like, well, because he even says it, they're barely used to me playing with them, but living in their neighborhood, that's a whole nother story. And we actually still see that today. So
Yeah.
I think the characters around him are very representative, even to this day, of the different attitudes and mindsets of Black people and what we're still trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I think that's the important part of those two characters, that they show two different aspects of what people view. So the baseball player, oh, you're rich, so you don't know what racism is anymore. No, he's still a Black guy.
Yep.
That's what he says. He's still
That's why I still live here.
he's still a Ligonian.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's still, yes.
He's still a Ligonian. And so it doesn't matter how much money he has. That's the first thing they see. That's the first way they're going to treat him. Doesn't matter what he does. Yeah, he can dance for him, but he's still a Ligonian. He can't enter those spaces.
Yeah, and he knew that.
Yeah, and the Jake character is, it's real because you can say, oh, he's like a caricature, but at the same time he's saying things that we hear now and that we see on Twitter. Like, I am not my ancestors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna
what's
hustle
the point?
so I can
What's
get
the
ahead.
point of dreaming? Because it is what it is, and this is the way it's going to be. There's no point in dreaming. It's not ever going to change. And Benny is okay, well, I can see that future. And that's, that is what keeps him going. And they're just three different versions of the same way Black people are interacted with and this thing about race and racism.
Jimmy's line about Black Man on the Moon made me think, well, firstly, there's the poet about a Black man on the moon, Black folks on the moon, and I can't remember what the poem, who wrote the poem, but it's fantastic. But it reminded me of when I went to see Deep Impact in 1997 in a movie theater, and Morgan Freeman showed up on screen, and I saw it in downtown DC at a Black theater, and somebody very loudly in the front of the theater goes, "A black president, a Black president. There ain't gonna be no Black president until an asteroid's about to hit the world." And
Sure enough.
You have those people, right? It just is what it is.
Exactly. There's always going to be folks who say those exact things. And I always wanted to go find him after Obama became president and ask that guy if there was going to be an asteroid sometime soon.
I mean, it missed us a few times,
That's true.
Yeah.
True.
That's fair.
I mean, look, we're dodging these meteorites. Just slightly.
Okay, so
So everybody can tell this episode kind of rubs me the wrong way.
I can see
You can
Marisha.
tell.
We see.
We
Okay.
see you.
Next question. All right. The cops harass Benny and ask him where he got the suit and they assume that he's a janitor and they say, "Hey boy."
Ooh.
Yes. I'm going to give it to Raina. So Raina
Yeah.
is research on this.
I think that was like that
I
part.
got feelings.
That part.
Or the slave patrol.
Me.
Anyway,
Yeah.
more papers, please. Slave
I
patrol.
have thoughts.
Raina.
Nonsense,
what-
because it's we still see it
Right,
happening
right.
today.
But Raina,
Raina, thank you.
Go ahead,
Raina,
Ray. I'm
research on
sorry.
this. Being
I'm
in New
You're
York.
right, Dre. I love you.
Thank you.
I got caught
I'm waiting
up.
my
My
turn.
bad.
I'm waiting my turn. Somebody call my name.
But no, as you were saying, Dre, I wish a lot of people learned about the history of policing in America, specifically in metropolitan areas as well, because, lynching and all force of violence against Black people and other brown and indigenous people not only existed in the South, but also happened up north. It's covered up or, seen in a different way, but it's definitely been a struggle seeing police, and specifically in this episode, specific when you know about darky hunting and the Harlem terrors, or the lynchings that used to happen downtown in they call it the 5 Points. If anybody watched, what was that Leonardo DiCaprio movie?
Gangs of New York.
Yes, Gangs of New York. There we go. Yeah. There's a scene there. You see the police, who happen to be of a specific descent, are hanging Black people for being around. And, that type of policing and that type of attitude continued. So when, Benny is stopped, and, the officer is questioning his humanity. Like, who are you? Why are you here? Why are you in this space? And he refers to him as a boy, not a man, but a boy. It's so demeaning, and it really pissed me off.
It's stopping.
Grace is Grace. What do you have to say?
I want to say, especially when it comes to talking about Benny Russell's character being referred to as boy. Now, I mean, I'm sure we're all familiar with the term, but back then, it's just another way to diminish and belittle and disrespect people of color, particularly Black people. You call adult men boy, and you rarely, if ever, address adult women. And it's something that's ingrained, and we don't really take notice of it. Like, adult men are boy instead of Mr. or Mrs. And like, if you look at the Uncle Ben's rice, there's a reason why it's Uncle Ben and not Mr. Ben. Like, there's a reason why the pancake mix is Aunt Jemima, whereas the other syrup pancake mix is Mrs. Butterworth. Like, the one with the white woman is Mrs. Butterworth, and the one with the Black woman is Aunt Jemima, because we didn't get that level of respect. Just the simple title, the simple courtesy of being called Mr. or Mrs., because you're an adult and you deserve that amount of respect. We didn't get that. It was always boy or uncle or auntie or mammy. Like, you just weren't entitled to that small level of respect on a human level. And like, him saying boy rubbed me all the way the wrong way. And I know they did it on purpose, but I definitely made a face.
Marisha, do you have a point?
I think the only reason they said boys because they couldn't say Ligonian.
I mean, so you didn't say it later on in the episode, but yeah, I get what it wasn't.
My issue with that is that people often see these depictions of Black trauma and think, oh, that's so long ago and that's tied up in a neat bow, but you ingest them and you ingest them and you ingest them, and they become a part of what you think is normal. But it's also that double entendre that when we tell you that, hey, that was a nice interaction with the police, you seem to think we're lying when you view it daily, that we're saying, hey, this dude over here is calling me a Ligonian and policing me in a way that you would never encounter. So yeah, this episode rubs me all the wrong way. That scene would encompass him being beat up, coming into work, and the group of people being like, well, we're glad you're okay.
It's not an easy episode to watch, right? Because of just how deep it cuts, because at some point, I'm pretty sure most Black Trekkies can recognize themselves in that episode, having to deal with some kind of situation, talking to friends, talking to a family member, dealing with police, dealing with coworkers, trying to navigate their workspace. So, it's a great episode in regards of the Black experience, yes. But, like we said, it's only a one part. We get about 40 some odd minutes of it. And it's just a fraction. It's just a fraction of, what it is we go through. So, good episode, absolutely, from that standpoint. So that's why I just don't really take too much issue with it, because of, certain certain factors such as time constraints.
So I think that's why it's important in the beating scene.
Yeah, we.
So to answer one of our viewers, that's why, and I mentioned this earlier, I don't know if you were here, why it was important that they were interspersing the 24th century people in these scenes, right? It's for, you're saying, is it written for white audiences? In a way, yes. Look at what's happening here. You are consuming this media about oppression, because the Bajorans and Cardassians are analogs to real world historical events, and you're fine with it. And so here it is how it can apply to science fiction, because a lot of science fiction is just reality under another name, right? It's meant to be commentary on what's happening in the present for some folks. And let me do that. But folks don't recognize it when it is just aliens. And like I said, I mentioned this already, so this is just me repeating my point. And so you have that. So folks, the Star Trek fans especially, who don't know why they don't like DS9, and they don't know why.
They don't like Discovery.
Or they can understand oppression between the Cardassians and the Bajorans, but they can't quite get it in real life. This is for them to see that, hey, you are supposed to understand that this is what people are going through. And to go back to the it's real scene, you can't, this is my idea, so it's real. If you notice, Star Trek is a show with a bunch of background noise. There's a lot of white noise, whether it be the computer, whether it be people walking behind them doing their work. But in that scene with Benny breaking down, there is absolutely nothing but Benny. Benny is the only thing you hear. And that's because they want the audience, whether they be, a majority white audience, to listen to that and understand that this is what they're supposed to understand. Like, this is the point of this episode. This is what the message you're supposed to take away of this scene. And so I think that's wonderful. Yeah, I think there were some good parts of this of Far Beyond the Stars. I have very few complaints.
Grace, then Travis. Grace.
We just have a question from the Twitch chat. Tamazon X Tam, who's a friend of the show, friend of some of us. She or they, sorry, want to know: was the episode written for a white audience? Do you think? Everybody, thoughts?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, all Star Trek is.
I mean, technically everything is. If we want to get really real, it's always written for with the white gaze in mind.
Right.
And that actually kind of goes to the comment that I was going to make, building on what Tia was saying a moment ago, is that it was written for a white audience, but at the end of the day, that's what Roddenberry's entire point was when he created Star Trek.
Yes.
Roddenberry's whole point was to hide a whole lot of social issues inside, pew pew spaceships. And in this case, what we now saw was science fiction, like literal science fiction, like the science fiction world being used as a metaphor for the social issues that we're all dealing with. But in this case, the veil is much, much thinner. It's not, as heavy. You can't hide behind Mr. Spock and his pointy ears and Scotty talking about warp engines now. Now we're talking about, people walking around Harlem being beaten by the police in 1950s, just like it happened in the 1990s and just like it happens today.
Okay, let's move on to our next topic of discussion. So when we kind of touched on this earlier, Benny's apartment has lots of black art on the walls. And Langston Hughes' book is on Benny's desk, and there's a picture of Langston Hughes on the cover with a typewriter. And then Rosal/Pork earlier said, "Oh, people are going to be scared of a Negro and a typewriter." There's Grace with the book.
There it is.
That's the one I was referencing earlier.
Yes.
So do we have any further thoughts? We touched on this one earlier. So do we have any further thoughts on that? I think
my only reference
the research on Marilyn?
No, I wanted to definitely support Marisha's take on, not including. I mean, I know for the time, they introduced individuals that we all learned in our history books. But I definitely want to support Marisha in the idea of supporting other writers and other people of this time and of any time who have also contributed to our history, not just ones that are digestible. Not saying that they didn't shake the table or they didn't cause conflict, because they sure did, because that was their form of activism. Trust me, it wasn't easy creating what they were doing at that time or in this time. It's just, I wish we had more than, I wish our education system was up to par. Even
Ooh, yeah.
higher education, because obviously we're still not learning and still not educating our citizens about history and the truth. And also it's a personal responsibility as well. Because we know that, that little textbook is not going to teach us what we're supposed to know. So I think it's best that as a community that we, teach each other. And so that's all. I just wanted to, I didn't want it to be lopsided and knock Marisha out.
Oh, okay. It's fun. I came to the party prepared to, be disowned and dishonored. Okay. I thought y'all was going to hit me with the exit turn. So the fact that I'm still here is good.
Travis,
we're not a monolith. We can disagree.
Travis, I was just going to comment on, your question. Benny was a lot more Afrocentric than I would have considered based on his day-to-day persona. Going back to what Marisha was saying, how he was like a go along to get along. He code switched, and we watched it in the episode. In the office, yeah, he was, if that's what you guys want to do, I'll take that drawing and I'll write up the story. But when he came out of the office, he's singing the doo-wop with those little boys. He had that little hat on.
Yes.
Which I think was Avery Brooks's hat. And it's just, it was really subtle. And again, not something that was part of the vernacular in the 90s. Like, we weren't talking about code switching in, regular conversation in the 90s, as far as I remember. But, they showed him doing it on the show, and I thought that was impressive.
And I viewed that completely differently. Like, for those scenes definitely gave me head in the clouds. If things are going right for me, I'm not paying attention to everything.
Isn't there one way to be an activist, though? Do we have to be?
No,
do we all have to be like?
No. I see where you trying to. I see this hole you trying to push me into it, and when I'm not falling. My issue is that he tried to coach Jake's character, to do something better. And I know y'all pointed out the difference of poverty. Benny was doing okay. So there was no point in Benny understanding the lower character's struggle.
Well, we don't know where Benny came from.
Yeah, Benny might not have always been like that.
We don't know that he's always been an upper class black. I mean, look, in Harlem, that's what there was. Okay, there was a different strata.
He was upper class by black standards, which we already know is nowhere on par the same as being upper class or even middle class.
We're not talking about those standards. We're not talking about that.
But he still lived in the community, which was even better because a lot of people left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the fact that he even still engaged,
there's a complete disconnect between Benny's character and Jake's Dynamite character that made me feel Benny's head was in the clouds the whole time.
But I mean, if you can be killed for just Benny. If you can be killed, if we're talking about encounters with a police that sees crime, right? and you can die from it. And Benny's telling the Jake character, hey, maybe don't do this because he understands you can die. I don't see how that's head in the clouds. That's, oh my goodness, you can just look the wrong way and end up killed, which is
That
essentially
happened.
what happened.
Which is exactly
to him.
what happened.
That's
He was
exactly
spot
what
on.
happened.
He got pulled over, not pulled over, but when the cops approached him, and he wasn't even doing anything at the time, they told
He
him
was
had
for the breaking
"Oh,
of the
we're gonna
car
let
for the
you
crowbar.
off with a warning." And so
We don't know if there is a crowbar or not. They could have been lying. We don't know that.
No,
Yeah, but
they
Oh,
said
now we do it.
I was
and
talking
he's-
about when Benny got pulled over, got accosted by the cops for the drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I was
they-
talking
yeah.
about Jimmy having the crowbar.
Okay, we're
I
gonna
was
get
talking. I was on Jim. I felt there was a
That later.
disconnect between Benny character and Jimmy's character. That's what I'm saying.
Well, the way I looked at it is the way that he was trying to be a mentor, right? And so, especially with the younger, because I have a younger brother, and I struggle with sometimes trying to. He's 9 years younger than me, and so sometimes I have to wonder, where is your head? What are you thinking? Because he's gone down that path, and now it's to the point where he's struggling because he did certain things in his youth to where he has a hard time doing anything for himself, including getting a job. So I totally understand where Benny was coming from. There are certain things that as Black people we can't do, we shouldn't do. And he was trying to steer Jimmy away from that. So it wasn't him having his head in the clouds. It was him trying to tell the young man, don't go this route, it's going to lead to a bad end. And it did.
Okay, Raina has a question.
I mean, I understand. I get what you're saying, Marisha, and also I feel like with some, I'm conflicted with that because Benny, to me, is an activist in his own right, in his own way, and he was trying to save a young man, unfortunately, who lost his life anyway. I think he was trying to steer him in a direction not to be complacent or complicit, but to use his anger in a different way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And instead of using, because obviously he was street smart, he was a hustler. So using that not to commit crime, because that was the one-way ticket to the pen or to being shot and killed, but using that to collectively help the community as well.
Mhm.
I just felt that he was trying to do what he thought was right.
Mhm.
And not to say that he was better than Jimmy at all. I don't think he was coming from that perspective. I think he was really trying to save this young man's life.
Okay, then Travis.
And what I'm saying is the disconnect is what we often find the disconnect coming from, is that once a group of people make a certain amount or they have a certain status, they don't understand why would somebody rob someone, or
No,
why
I
would
agree.
this happen?
I see that point, but I don't think this was Benny Russell's issue. I don't think this is where he
It's just
he felt
easy.
that he was
Don't do
better
that.
than everybody. I don't think
I didn't say he thought he was better than everybody. I said there was a disconnect in social status and between social status.
Yeah, but we don't know
why-
where Benny was coming from, where his beginning started. He could have been in the same situation as James a few years ago. I mean, he was a Navy veteran. He could have been on the streets. We don't know what his backstory is. We're only seeing him now, and he's trying to teach this young man and help him go forward and not end up in a grave on Potter's Island with no tombstone.
Like we
with nobody-
can give him understanding, but those cops, the Ducat and way you won't.
Still won't.
But
Okay,
is he wrong for living his life the way he lives his life? Getting it how he live it. That's what I'm saying.
Nah.
I mean, no one said that though.
I think what Marisha's talking about is, what we call now respectability politics. The Bill Cosby with the pull up your pants and you'll be better, and that kind of thing. But I'm more in line with what Raina's saying here. Is I don't think that's where Benny was coming from here. He wasn't saying anything as basic as, pull up your pants and people look at you better. In this case, he was telling him to use the skills that you have, but use them for the collective. And that's where that's why I like Benny's character, because if it hadn't been for the breakdown at the end, I mean, you could see that Benny was going to become more of a social leader, more of almost like a socialist kind of leader, the community above all. Like, he would, like I said, he was very community minded. He was trying to teach people by example. He didn't need to be the guy. He didn't need to be the guy. He didn't need to be the guy to go who actively, no, this is wrong all the time. For instance, just looking at the thing with his girlfriend, just a sec, just looking at the thing with Cassidy, and Fake Worf. He respected her enough to let her handle it. He didn't come across as the kind of person who was going to be patronizing to people in any aspect of their lives, from my perspective.
I don't know how y'all got that. I felt like his head was completely in the sand and he was absorbed in his books and his writing and his dream of being a writer.
No, I agree. I disagree. Because he was
it's fine. I know y'all love Avery Brooks.
Writing.
It's not about loving Avery Brooks. That's the way the character is written.
Here's the thing. For me, I relate to Benny on so many different levels, right? From having the dreams of being a writer, which that has evolved because of what I'm doing. But for me, that is entirely relatable, because for so long, I have been doing the practical thing. I have been going to a job that, and working in a career where it's cool, but is it something that's fulfilling? No. Is it my dream? No. So I can understand him saying, no, I'm not going to give up on my dream. I can understand him saying to Jimmy, I do respect you and what it is that where you're coming from, but at the same time, maybe figure out a better way that isn't going to get you killed, right? Mm-hmm. I respect that Benny, like Raina said, was an activist in his own right. He wasn't someone who preached down to anyone else. He took people for who they were. And in terms of someone like a Jimmy, just tried to try and steer them in a direction that's a little bit better. Now, at the same time, I also understand where a person like Jimmy is coming from, because I went down that road myself a little bit, angry. Nothing's ever going to change. They're always going to treat us this way. So it takes also a certain level of maturity. And I think Benny probably saw something in Jimmy that reminded him of his younger self, which is why he was so passionate about trying to get Jimmy to leave that crime and get himself out of that life. I really think that's where Benny was coming from. I see something in you that you don't see in yourself that also reminds me of myself. So let me try and, get you away from this young man. That's the way that I took it, because I'm that way myself. It's like I try and take people for face value and who they are as people. So, I totally relate to that. And I totally understand where Benny is coming from. And I don't fault him for it.
We're going to have to agree to disagree.
So
Yeah,
yeah, we're obviously going to disagree.
Agree.
Yeah,
It is what it is, which is
yes.
fine.
Yes, it's great because we have our 7 different opinions, and that's perfectly fine. But we are going to move on to our next question, which is his girlfriend Cassie not taking him seriously? Culturally, culturally
15 years.
Culturally significant. Is that significant? And I'm going to say that this was a sensitive topic for me because I felt like this.
See, y'all gonna make me late for dinner.
Okay,
Go on then.
I'm gonna go in real fast.
Feeds into the narrative of Black women not being supportive, and there were some times where I felt like Cassie was doing a good job because when she was talking to Worf, just like I mentioned earlier, she was like, "I won't be doing anything before 10 with you," but at the same time, like even the part where Worf was holding her hand. And I was like, why is he holding your hand? You have a man. Like, stop. But she was still, to me, it was like her character was on again and off again. Like, even when he was telling her about his story, there was a point where he rolled his eyes because she interrupted him. And she was like, well, I want to tell you that, they're going to be stopped within a few years. And then he's like, okay, here we go again. So to me, as a Black woman, I was like, okay, does this make us seem like feed into the narrative of us not being supportive, of us not being there for our men, quote unquote? Or is it that she's trying to bring him back down to earth and make it a more logical situation that they're in? What are y'all?
I feel it feeds into two narratives that we have as Black women. Everybody bringing up the 15 years that a woman is supposed to, Black women in particular, is supposed to struggle and build their man and wear them down until they get married. So that's the one. While also keeping in mind the narrative that this man told the dreams and she was unsupportive. She had her own agenda that did not equate with what he was doing. But everybody want to be like, 15 years, she's supportive, that's supportive. No, that's just weighing somebody down.
I disagree completely.
So those were the two narratives I got from her. I really didn't, especially there was no parallel with her DS9 character, who is fearless. You wouldn't be with me if I wasn't fearless. Versus, it's 15 years, I didn't put in my time. You're not going to settle down with me? I ain't got time.
Why you gotta give her the voice like that though?
Yeah.
Why she gotta sound like that though? She didn't sound like that.
Well, we have a comment here.
That begging Black woman to choose me.
Raise your hand.
Choose me. That begging Black woman. Choose me. I didn't put up the time. I didn't support
I
you.
knew you didn't just call her pick me.
No.
Hold on.
No.
Grace,
no.
go ahead, Grace. Go ahead, Grace.
I just say pick me.
Grace. Marisha, you done. Marisha, done. Grace.
Okay. So when you have Cassie's character, you got to think of a lot of things. Like there are other factors in play here. First of all, it's the 50s. Like, yes, she's a Black woman working in this shop, but I wouldn't say she has her own agenda, but she definitely has her own dream of owning this coffee shop, diner, restaurant thing that she works in. But she wants to do that with Benny. Like her dream, her agenda includes Benny. Like beside her, like they're supposed to do this together. And yeah, she wants to get married. It's the 50s. That's what you do. Like her being in a position where they can even think about owning this diner as Black people is something that's way, way out of range for a lot of people at that time. So her having this dream, yes, her own agenda, but it does include Benny. Like she has that thought of how the two of them as Black people are going to get ahead in the world that they're in. And that's important to her. Yes. Now, yes, she sees that, look, these stories that Benny is writing after his story gets rejected, like that doesn't seem to be going in the direction that Benny wanted to. And she does suggest alternatives. No, they're not alternatives that Benny likes, but she does suggest alternatives. She's still looking out for what the best thing could be for the both of them. Whereas Benny's dream of being a writer, a novelist, really only includes him. And
Good point.
like, and that was one of the things that stuck out for me. Like, no, she's not exactly like her DS9 counterpart Cassidy, and that she's solo, she's fearless, she does what she wants. She doesn't necessarily need no man to, help her and prop her up. But in the 50s, like after 15 years, that's what you do. You get married. You have some kids. It's the 50s. That's what you do.
Yeah.
Okay, Dre, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, there was someone who made a point. Tilly on YouTube said, we are always put in that responsible person in the family role, and that's what I saw in her. Then we have Sonia, who followed up with, there was also the I can change him stereotype. So, I actually kind of saw her in the stereotype of the Black woman who's the ride or die, right? How often do we see you stick by your man no matter what? Which, Grace, you made a lot of good points. When you look at it from the lens of being the 1950s, she was a woman of her time. You get married, you settle down, you have some children, and you find a way to support that
Children,
family.
yes.
Children, yes.
Okay, between all of you and these words.
So she was a product of her time. And for her to even be so outspoken to him, that's the other thing. Let's not act as if she was a woman who didn't have her agency, because she very much did. Okay.
Especially for the time.
Exactly. So looking at it from the standpoint of a woman in the 50s who's Black, who's like, babe, we, and she says it, we can have this diner. We can buy this if we want to. We can run this place together. We can, yes, she says that. She said we can own it because they're going to sell it in years.
Not rent it, own.
Own, exactly. OWN, own. Not Oprah Winfrey Network people, but own. They're the ones who have it. It's theirs. Which, like Grace said, that is a big deal for Black people to own anything. Even today is a big deal. But then in the 50s, it was a huge deal, because most Black people didn't even own a car, let alone a business, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So
So yeah, I'm not with calling Cassie a pick me. I'm not with that at all. I'm sorry, Marisha, I know you're not here. I'm not with that at all. Sorry, no. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I was like,
no. And that's my thing. I'm not saying that, he should have necessarily given up his dream because he was with her for 15 years and she stuck by him for that long. But, at the same time, when you look at her and you hear how she speaks to him, it's always we, us.
Mm-hmm.
It's never me, my dream. It's us, our dream, our future.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That was her dream for both of them. And that's a good partner right there.
Okay, Travis, you have a question. It's Travis, Raina, then Grace, and then next question.
Yeah, I think there's 3 points that I wanted to make about this. Firstly was that eye roll that he does when she starts to talk about the restaurant. What I thought was interesting was he had good news, and she's like, yeah, that's good. Here's my good news. And I can see where you would have an annoyed look on your face if your partner did that. It's like, I'm coming at you with like something really big, and you're like, sure. Moving on. Here's my story, and yeah, I mean, like that's what I felt in that moment. I didn't feel like that was. I'm sorry, I got a lot of echo right there. I didn't feel like that was a big deal so much. I just felt like that was like, I'm trying to tell you a story and now you cut me off. Secondly, though, going back to what everybody else said about how she had dreams that included them, how it was them. I don't think that that's even the important part. I think the important part was that she had dreams. Period. I mean, gets to sit here and talk about his dreams. She gets to talk about the dreams that she has. They're partners. That's what's supposed to happen. Like it shouldn't be, all about Benny. It should be about them sharing their dreams together. And I didn't see a problem with the fact that she, voiced those. And I think lastly, from, any kind of stereotype, I'd support Grace and say it was the 50s. She wanted to get married. I mean, that's what she did. And I don't think that she was pushing him to do anything that was unnatural or out of the ordinary. That was just how society worked.
Okay, Raina, and then Grace.
I'll pass on this one. I'll go for the next question.
Okay, Grace. Final thought.
A final thought in regards to Cassie and Willie Worf trying to be Mr. Steal Your Girl over here. Like, you gotta remember that Cassie is still a waitress at a diner. She still has that inset. Even now, we have this as a person in the service industry. You have to be polite to the people that come into your diner. If you're a woman and you're working the counter, yes, you may have to flirt with the men a little bit because that's just what you're expected to do. And in the 50s, even more so. Like, if you rebuff the advantage, that could mean like bad things could happen. He might not pay you. He might do something else. Like, you don't know. He could break a plate. He could get violent. You don't know. So she has that inset obligation to be nice to this person because not only are they a friend, and yes, he's trying to woo her, court her, mac on her, whatever you want to call it, but she's also in a position, she's at work. She has to be polite. She doesn't really have a choice in that matter. And I feel she rebuffs him as gently and pointedly as she can in that situation. Like, there's only so much that she can do from where she is. Like, yes, they're both Black, but she's still a woman working in a diner and she still has that obligation to be nice.
That's a good point. Okay, next question. So Cassie asked Willie, why is he still living uptown? He can live anywhere he wants, considering he's a famous baseball player. And he's like, the hell I can. They can hardly get used to me playing alongside them. I'm just another colored boy that can hit a curveball. Raina, you first.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that did also strike a nerve. Cause he spoke truth. No matter how many home runs you hit, he was still a Black man, and he was playing on a white team in a white society.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of other historical things going on in the city at that time. There was blockbusting going on, and for those who don't know what blockbusting is landlords literally would dump the price of homes and apartments, and white flight occurred, allowing certain groups to move in, and then they would raise the rents super high. Sounds familiar to anyone?
Mm-hmm. Gentrification.
And then forcing them out again.
Yeah.
This has been a constant struggle. There were also other forms of redlining and segregation in other ways, but Worf's character, or Willie, who I kind of imagined to be Willie to say, "Hey,
Willie
kid, Mays," which was awesome because I'm a big baseball.
That's who they based him on. Yeah,
based him on. And I'm not going to give a pat on the back to the MLB for finally acknowledging that the Negro Leagues were a part of baseball and deserved. That's long overdue, but that's another conversation. But he was true in his assessment. Although he so-called made it, he's dealing with his own form of segregation, discrimination, and his experience should not be, thrown away as well.
Right. I mean, to it goes back to the Kanye song "All Falls Down," where he says, "Even if you in a Benz, you still a N-word in the coupe." And Willie was right. He knew he was the realist. When you look at everyone else who was around Benny, he was the realist. He knew what his limits were. He knew how he had to operate in white spaces and around white people. And it still holds true today. I know I have to operate a certain way inside of the workplace and outside of the workplace. I can't be up at that job too vocal, and it sucks because I have an opinion about everything. Okay, I don't know if you guys picked that up, but
yeah, we know.
Yeah, we know.
we
We know.
18,
Yeah, we know.
we 18 episodes into this podcast. I have an opinion about everything. So me having to hold my tongue as much as I do and having to have as much patience as I have today, oh boy, it's, because me 10 years ago at 29, I would have been yeeted myself out of a job. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. So, that's one of the reasons why I really, look at Willie's character as kind of he was a more real world Benny. See, Benny had the dream. Benny was the dreamer. But you have Willie, who's the realist.
Tia, you had your hand raised, and then you put it back down. Are you done? Okay.
No. I want to go. I didn't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Tia.
For now.
So this is getting to one of the points I think the episode was trying to make. You know how we have the conversations about race and racism, depending on, the time, whoever you're talking to is like X people can't experience racism because they've made it class-wise, and so we can ignore the other problems because, hey, they're rich. So what is the problem that they may have? And then we also have the folks that are like, I think this episode is also in conversation with 90s fans, especially thinking about the time period of the things that are going on in America at the same time as this episode is airing. And it's reminding them about the importance of looking at like characters like Benjamin Sisko and realizing that they still are experiencing sort of the problems of their period and of outside of that. Like, look outside of yourself, Star Trek fans. Black people experience things that doesn't detract from your who was it that said the Pew Pew Space Show? Was that you, Travis?
Yeah, that's my new t-shirt.
Doesn't detract from that. You can
my name.
Well, you think about it, like DS9 went through a lot of the things that we see with Disco, right? Like the same sort of complaints, the same sort of baseless crap that they're getting, thrown at them because they dare talk about things like race. They dare have LGBT people on screen. They dare, put women in important spaces. And DS9 was doing that in itself, Sisko as captain, Kira as first officer, and daring to do that and talk about race and oppression in the 24th century. Like, people don't want to look at that and think that there's still problems. They just want to look at their nice aliens and keep it moving. They don't want to reflect on what they're like outside of the hour that they're spending watching Star Trek and how they can impact the world around them. And so, like, this episode, I like this episode. I'm sorry. I'm actually a fan of it.
Grace, you can go.
Well, when it comes to Willie, I mean, there's some people in the chat, Mersha cutting up in the chat still. She said Willie is said Willie is a little bit as can I say the word? She said coonies.
Oh, wow.
So, and I was like, I think that's a little bit harsh.
Yeah.
Like, yes, he is, like, as a baseball player, he is more in the, y'all probably not gonna like this. He's more in the minstrel area because he's there and he's accepted by the Pinkskins for entertainment purposes, but not taken seriously as just, a man, a person with his own humanity. Like, I think it's going a little far to say he's that word. But yes, in
Trash
that he
panda.
has to entertain people, he's going along to get along because he has to. Like, that's literally how he makes his money. He's a baseball player. Like, I don't know if him and they're comparing him to Samuel L. Jackson in Django Unchained. I was like, I don't think we're
That's
on
still out
the
of
equal
pocket.
level there.
Just so everyone
No.
knows,
No,
just
he's not-
so
he's
everyone
not that-
knows,
well,
the term Pinkskins is from Star Trek Enterprise. It is the term that the Andorian Shran uses for humans. Just so you know, it's a Star Trek term.
so
White humans.
Completely ignoring Travis.
No, they
completely
used it for
ignored
all
Travis
humans.
and,
No, they
and
used
I
Sato
mentioned that in the
completely ignored them.
because his behavior in the community is very much of that word. However, he is not ignorant to discrimination. He knows
Exactly.
that.
He's just wait. We talking about fake war?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're talking about Willie.
Like, yeah, Will.
What I don't get how he's a
Me
coon.
neither
I'm
do
sorry. He
I.
just likes to get
not.
laid. What's wrong with that? He's a man. Like what? He's supposed to be like that man who's a pimp.
Yeah, he's like your-
everybody knows Mac Daddy so and so.
He's the neighborhood
like,
athlete. I
we're
mean,
black.
he's the superstar athlete, and he's out there, doing his thing.
Moving and getting autographs and all that other stuff.
All the things Star
But
Trek
yeah,
fans
he's
didn't
not
do.
ignorant to- he's not an Uncle Ruckus. He's not.
No.
But he's not ignorant to what's the role he's had to play to get where he is. I just don't like characters like. Maybe it's just him. Maybe it's Michael Dorn.
I really wish
No.
that poor Michael Dorn, and I know we be calling War for Trifling Baby Daddy all the time. I really wish, and I like Michael Dorn, I really wish his characters wouldn't get pushed into these tiny ass boxes to work and act out of. I think it's
if he was likable.
yeah, it's a disservice to Michael Dorn because he could he has this opportunity. He's a good actor, he has a great voice. But then they make him to give him these really unlikable characters. I don't like you. Stop macking on somebody else's girl. Stop being so stuck up your own ass. You're still black like the rest of us. Win a fight. Please.
We talked about this.
Oh man.
We talked about this. I did the count. Okay. He didn't lose every fight.
No, but I think his batting average should be more than 0.5 is what I'm saying.
Okay, you all. We have a question coming up that I'm going to ask that everyone think about and listen before we discuss. And if you have a point or comment to make, raise your hand via the Skype, okay? So the question is Jake problematic? Now think about this for a second because I thought about this all afternoon. And so I'm going to go with yes, because I don't like the fact that, okay, we know that his character dies at the end of the episode. And so he supposedly dies breaking into a car and they say he has a crowbar. And I personally feel like a point could have been made if he wasn't the hustler type. Because when I hear on, when we look at the case of Mike Brown and Eric Garner, those were two men that were supposedly breaking the law when they were murdered. So with Mike Brown, he stole the cigarettes, and then Eric Garner was selling individual cigarettes which I guess is illegal in New York.
It's called a Lucy.
Lucy.
And it is illegal, but
Yes.
whatever.
During that time, a lot of the arguments were, okay, well, they wouldn't have been killed if they weren't breaking the law. And so putting that in this story where you have this young man who is breaking into a car and then he gets shot. I'm like, why was that necessary, DS9? Like, why couldn't he have been just minding his own business? And then he's, still caught up in this situation with the cops. Now, that does also go into respectability politics. Because do we have to be the good person all the time? And then also, I feel like, of course, the crime didn't justify the ends, So to me, I'm torn between, is Jake problematic? Yes, because I don't always want the young Black man to be portrayed as a criminal. But then at the same time, on the other side is, okay, even if he was a criminal or did things that weren't exactly legal, he didn't deserve to die. He's still a person. So, okay, I saw Travis raise his hand first. So let's go.
Ready. Travis is ready.
I can't hear you. Can anybody hear him?
He's muted still.
No, because I was on mute.
Yeah.
I'm going to say he was not problematic because people like him exist, right? And people like him don't deserve to be shot in the street. I mean, that's really the bottom line. It's a society should be judged by how it treats, what they call the lowest members of that society. And in this case, let's say he was a criminal. You don't murder a person for breaking into a car. You put them in cuffs and take them to jail. And, they do whatever restorative justice there is. You don't murder them. And that goes into, the real life examples. And that's why I love this episode so much, because it really that's why I love Deep Space Nine so much, because it predicts a lot of the large scale social ills that we have ended up dealing with in the early 21st century. You look at the Bell riots in Trek, the Cardassians and Bajorans. That's an issue we've been dealing with in the real world for, more than my lifetime, and my lifetime has been a long time. And then then
he's act like he's ancient as hell.
Like
what?
He act like he done made 80 revolutions around us.
I'm like the street preacher in this episode.
Which I would love to talk about, by the way.
The prophet's brother Travis.
Exactly. And then you look at Michael Brown, Eric Garner, George Floyd, all these people who were murdered for petty crimes. Yeah, they were crimes, but they were petty crimes. And I don't live in a society where, and yeah, I know they really weren't killed for the crimes. I mean, but that was what put them on the cops' radar at that second.
Well, here's the thing. Not to cut you off, Travis, but we know the reality is a Black person doesn't even have to do anything wrong.
Absolutely.
Because look at what happened to Philando Castile. He was complying, and pop, he's dead. And
he had a gun, just like they say, good guys with a gun and all that other stuff. So yeah, I don't see that there was anything problematic with him. I wish, so many of our young folks didn't feel like they had to turn to crime to do better, but that happens. There's reasons that happens beyond just narratives on a television show.
Okay, so Dre, I think you had your hand up, and then it's Raina, then Tia, then Grace. Okay, Tia, do you want to go now? Or
Tia go, because she's dying up here.
Yeah, let Tia go first. It's fine.
Look, okay.
He died.
He's about to fight somebody.
So I think Shaniqua's point comes to two things, right? I want to address the second one first. Like, why do we, and also Marisha's comment in YouTube together.
Oh God.
So I don't think it's a factor of Black pain and Black trauma being profitable. I think it's an understanding of, in the 90s and to now, our president 2021, this is the reality. This is all it takes is a misconception or whatever of a police officer, and you end up dead. Like this is what happens to people. And unfortunately, these traumatic things happen to us. And I don't think that it's profitable. It's real. And I think
Not profitable
having
for
to
us,
show it.
but for
It's not profitable. But I think in a story like this, where it's so clear that I think even though the story was written by someone white, you can very much see that there was Black input put into it. Because there's so many aspects of it that are recognizable to us as Black people, right? This is not like a alliances from Voyager, where we have a person reading the news about Black issues and writing an episode that's mad trash. Like, this one has a Black understanding to it. And so you're laughing, but I'm so serious. But so, I don't view it as, just them Black torture porn. I view it as, well, this is what we lived through. And it's showing the majority white audience that this is what Black people experience, and you can see it, and we're showing you through your beloved Star Trek characters so you can understand. And so that's what I think about the second point. For the first point, is he problematic? Is Jake a problematic character? As Travis said, this type of person does exist in reality, and we have the Benny who's not doing any sort of crime. He's just living his life going on. We have the rich guy. So the Dorn, Brooks, and Lofton are three different aspects of Black life.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so the character that Jimmy?
Yes,
Jimmy.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Jimmy.
I'm so
It's Jimmy.
Their non-DS9 names are not something I'm going to remember. I'm sorry. And so Jake is that aspect of Black life, and that's all that his purpose is there for. I don't think it's meant to be any more than, here are three ways we're showing you Blackness. That's the way that I read it.
Okay, Dre, I'm gonna let you go next, and then Raina.
Well, I really don't have a view that's too much different from what Travis and Tia have actually already said, in that this very much is, Black people who do exist. And here's the thing with, Black people, in terms of how some of us want to try and better the community and better ourselves by pushing away and trying to distance from the so-called, thugs and hoochie mamas, and we don't want them to, be at these Black events. We don't want these hood rats showing up. We don't want to hear, the trap music. Don't come up in there with your rap music and your pants hanging down, and with your hair all done up, looking all extra ethnic, and just these types of things. We don't want the ghetto element of Black people. And that's just one aspect of the Black society that we try and push away, right? Because let's keep it real. We try and push out, Black LGBT people. No, we don't want you Black disabled people. Because apparently these types of things aren't Blackness, when in actuality they are. And it's a conversation that we need to start having, because there is no one way to be Black. There is no right or wrong way to be Black. So to try and distance ourselves from people who are hood, ghetto, the Black people who unapologetically are not, within the scope of being a model minority, that's a disservice to us, because we're saying, as Black people, in order for us to be respectable, we have to act and and appear to be a certain way. And it's for white approval, which I absolutely hate. That's where it comes in being a Jim Hadar type, right? So why should we not have people like a Jimmy or Jake's character for Tia? You know, we can't sit here and ignore them and act as if they don't exist and act as if they're not a part of the community, because they very much are. They're still Black people. And even though they do things we don't approve of or like, or that we feel is a stereotype to those outside of the community, they still exist. And we can't sit here and pretend as if they don't exist. You're not going to solve a problem by tiptoeing around it or not confronting it. So we have to ask ourselves as Black people, which crime in our community isn't what it's really not that bad. We're not all thugs and criminals. That's part of the stereotype. But you have to look at someone like a Jimmy who, you know, if under a different set of circumstances, maybe he could have gone into entrepreneurship, because obviously he has the drive, he has intelligence, and that's something that we need to keep in mind. All of these things that Black people have been trying to do throughout our history in this country, you know, Tulsa is a perfect example of this. And it's just one example. It's the most recent example of how we've made something out of nothing only for it to be taken from us. So in an era like the 50s, a young man like Jake has potential, has opportunities, but they aren't there for him because of the systems that are in place and in the society that he has to operate. So he's not problematic, in my opinion. I just said it in a very long-winded way. Sorry.
Okay.
Because you have opinion. Fine.
Grace.
As you mentioned, Dre, you know, just because you know, this person grew up on a different side of the tracks or does other things that that white society or deems to be appropriate, that doesn't mean they're not deserving of being treated as human beings. And that goes for anybody. Also, Marisha talked about bonnets. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation about the bonnets.
Bonnets?
Yeah, there was a whole drama
politics
about wearing bonnets.
It was a thing.
Oh, the what's her name?
Monique. And
yes.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. We'll talk about that. But yeah, it's, you know, treating people as human beings first. Okay, is what, to me, is what we should be doing. But is Jake problematic? I don't like his caricature. I don't like that he is this, you know, I mean, 50s hustler. I mean, that was Harlem. Unfortunately, that he was living in the times of what was going on. You know, it's post-war. There was a lot of economic instability for Black communities in specific parts of Harlem, not all of it, because there were places called Sugar Hill and other that were prominent and had money. They were living. They were doing well. You know, they were doctors, they were lawyers, and others. But then there was the other side. And he was living in a society where he had to do what he had to do. That didn't mean he had to die. And, you know, it's something that I think we need to continue having a conversation on. And just understand that we all must be treated with respect, unless you otherwise tell me, you know, you no longer deserve it.
And then Grace?
I think my problem, I don't know if I would say particularly that Jake's character, Jimmy, is problematic. I would say that my main issue with Jimmy as a character is not so much that he is a stereotype, but too much of a stereotype. Like, I don't know if Sirach just threw himself too deeply into that particular role, but I just think he was too heavy-handed with it. I think the body language was too heavy. I think the slang was too heavy. I think the tone was too heavy. I think the way he was acting it was too much of that hustler stereotype. He's literally a caricature. He could have played it a little less, a little bit more laid back, and still gotten the same message across. I don't like so much that it's like, oh, you're that guy. You're all the way that guy. I think we as a people, even hustlers, they're real people. They exist. They have more dimension than what Jake or Jimmy was portraying. And that just goes back to say that, like what we were talking about earlier, the people that are acting around Avery Brooks, like look paper mache next to Avery Brooks. Like anything you're doing next to Avery Brooks doesn't look as good if you're just not at that level. So
Exactly.
Well, I mean, he's also
And
young.
Ciroc
again,
was young.
Ciroc was very young at that point, and you have him being young, and this is one of the only moments in DS9 where you get him playing an adult. Like every other time towards the end of the season, like yes, he's grown up, but he's still very much a teenager. He's still very much a child. He's still very much seen as Ben Sisko's son. Like he's supposed to be a kid, but you have him in this alternate reality universe back in time, and he's supposed to be playing an adult. So there's that. So again, this is more of Ciroc just not playing it in a way that I think was good for the character. Like, yes, you can be a stereotype without being a caricature. And the only other thing, and this is obviously a lot lighter, and yes, I'm going to bring it up. I have a bone to pick with whoever designed this wig that Jimmy is wearing because it is not good. I know we talked about hair already.
The facial hair was just as bad. I can't.
I know we talked about hair already. Like we did a whole episode on hair, and like this wig, like I know what you were going for. And the wig is shiny. At least it's not dry, but it's still not a good wig. I'm sorry, it wasn't. You can do better.
You didn't like the perm.
I like. It's not that I don't like perms. You can have your hair laid as a man. Like, psh, like look at Little Richard. Man's hair laid all the time.
Oh,
James
man.
Brown hair laid all the time. You can do that and have it not look bad. Like the
Well, you know, he probably did it himself in the sink, you know, real quick. He went
beforehand. Like I don't know who did hair on this episode.
Live with potatoes. Yeah,
but like I mean, Avery, you know, he has his bald head. He has his hat on. Like Cassidy Yates' character. Everybody else hair looked good, and as far as you know, wigs go. But Ciroc, the wig they put Ciroc in was not good.
Yeah, here's the thing. That was
like you can't notice it in the beginning because he has the hat on, but after when he takes it off.
Yeah, that was Michael Dorn's hair. That's before he went with the cue ball look too. So that was his full head of hair in that episode. But remember, Raina, it wasn't a perm back then. It was a process.
You're right.
And then here's what's crazy back then.
Right.
And I read this in the autobiography of Malcolm X. I've read that book so many times. They use actual lye. The actual chemical.
Yeah.
Yes.
Didn't you watch What's Love Got to Do with It? What happened to Anime?
She burned her hair. And she
Burned her hair off.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, you all, we got to move on.
This is why I'm team natural. Anyway.
We have
I'm going with the creamy crack.
And we're almost 2 hours in, so we got to
rein it in.
Okay, so we hear that Paps say people won't accept a Negro captain. So, okay, let's rein this in a little bit. So this story takes place in 1953. And so about 15 years later in 1960s, the original series, they had to couch social issues and use them metaphorically for racial discussions. And one of the examples, and Travis is not with us right now, but one of the examples is Let That Be Your Last Battlefield in the original series, where Commissioner Bill was Black on the right side and white on the left side. He was chasing someone who was Black on the left side and white on the right side. And so one of the things that Marisha brought to, wanted us to discuss on this particular topic was the trend of Black narration without Black writers. Let's discuss. What do y'all think? Do y'all think it's an issue that, you know, Tia brought it up earlier that this episode was written by white writers, but it's obvious that they had Black input.
And I think that's probably from the fact that Avery Brooks was directing.
Yes. You can tell that this is an episode that was his child, and that's the thing, man. Throughout that series, and I've said it, and I'm gonna keep on saying it until probably I'm blue in the face, but in terms of the Black representation on that show and how Cisco is portrayed and things like that, Avery himself did so much heavy lifting. Okay, he did a lot for Benjamin Sisko to be the character that we see on screen, which does say that, in fact, back then, even though Star Trek is supposed to be very progressive, that hasn't always been the case behind the scenes or in front of the camera, which, let's be real, look at what happened when Disco dropped.
And we're going to discuss Disco in a little bit, but let's bring it back to DS9, where he said that. Hold on, I'm sorry, y'all.
Well, here was the thing. That was a hard pushback in the 90s when they introduced Cisco.
Right.
Those message boards and those chat rooms back in the 90s, those forums, it was ugly. Okay, it was the same reaction, and I bring up Disco because it was the same reaction. It was a lot of racism, but a little bit different because it was the sexism on top of that. But it was racism, man. Star Trek fans pushed hard, so they were so against it, and it was really ugly. And that doesn't surprise me because, you know, actually, I'm glad they incorporated that because that's exactly what happened. A lot of fans didn't want to accept a Black lead on a Star Trek show.
Does anyone, I don't know if anyone was around in the 90s besides Travis.
I was.
I think we all were alive. Look, I'm just saying, you know.
Look, I graduated in 2000s, okay? So I'm watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine as a teenager in high school. And I'm telling you, this is exactly what happened. Disco is just a repeat of that with sexism added on top. They did not like the fact that there was a Black captain on Deep Space Nine. And I'm glad that they talked about it in this episode because that is exactly what happened.
How long did it take people to come around to DS9?
There are still people who haven't come around to DS9. For the fact that
the new target is just Disco.
Someone mentioned
that. That's it.
Yeah, he didn't even start out as a captain. He started out as a freaking commander. And they hated it. They hated that it was a
now people love it because Disco is giving us a Black woman in charge, Asian woman in charge, gay characters, trans characters, non-binary characters. That is why DS9 is now on people's favorite list. Period.
Yeah, because of how much further they pushed the diversity with Disco and with Picard in some elements. Because of how Star Trek is no longer trying to hide the diversity and code it in different aliens and things like that. Yeah, even Voyager a little bit. People are like, oh, Voyager was better than this. And I'm just like, in the 90s, you didn't even want Voyager or Deep Space Nine. Please shut up. STFU. Shut the up.
Grace, please.
Look, Tam is saying in the Twitch chats that people didn't want the Black captain. They didn't like that they had Star Trek on a space station instead of a starship. They didn't like the show was dealing with politics and religion. They did not like Deep Space Nine at all when it came out. And I mean, I was there. I remember. But like, for me, like the quote in general, people won't accept a Black captain. And you have to think about the people who they're talking about here. And when they say people won't accept, they mean, the pinkskins. They won't accept a Black captain because captain is not a position that a Black man could hold. Just in general, like if a Black man is too respectable, it's too high up. Even like, we just got out of a world war, like, because it's the 50s, like even in the army, as far as ranks go, captain is just too high up for a Black person to hold, like as far as the pink skins go. But then you have, from the Black perspective, a Black captain. That's, yes, something to aspire to, but that's not something that we can get to. That's just something that wasn't allowed. They won't accept a Black captain because at the time it literally was not possible. You have a Black captain, and not only is he a Black captain, but he's a Black captain in space. Are they going to send Black people to space and let them be captain? No. So no, people at the time are not going to accept a Black captain. He's not wrong. The people with power, the people with money, the people that are going to be buying this sci-fi magazine, like, it's not a plausible character. And I'm just going to reiterate I guess an anecdote that happened to me when I was watching, this is a couple years ago. I was in a Discord chat. We were watching Black Panther together as a group because we're nerds and that's the kind of thing that nerds do.
I wasn't invited.
This is before I knew you. That's why you weren't invited. This is before I knew you. And in the chat, because of course I'm reading the chat and watching the movie, and one of the people in this group was just like, I really didn't like this Marvel movie. It was bad. I didn't like it. It was bad. And I was like, why do you think it was bad? And he's like, well, it's just not plausible. And I'm like, what about it isn't plausible? It's like, well, you have this country of Black people that's just not plausible. I'm like, okay, let me just stop you right there. And I typed out, I took my time and typed out, I'm like, in a universe where there are aliens, a radioactive green man, actual Norse gods, time travel, and the country that wasn't colonized and is full of Black people is the part that's implausible? Like, that's what you're telling me? Like, it's people,
exactly.
They can't wrap their head around what is possible and not. And for them, if something is not possible from that particular racist perspective, it's not possible, period. So Black captain, not possible, period. Yeah. Don't give me a story like that, not even in fantasy, because it's not possible, period.
Yeah, I saw so much of Wakanda isn't real. I'm like, oh, Asgard isn't real. That's mythology. But okay. All right.
Tia?
So this gets at a good point that happens in the episode as well. When Benny is let go, right before it's real, it's my idea, it's real, it exists. We let him go because he's just not meeting expectations. There's this language that I think is important for the time period and now, that you can do something racist but couch it behind reasonable language.
Yep.
And it's only to certain people under certain gazes where you realize that what they're doing is racist. And so when Grace is talking about, oh, I just don't know why I don't like Wakanda, right? Or, oh, there's something about disco I just don't like. There's something about DS9 that I just can't get into. It's that type of comment that they're doing, like, just as what the unnamed, which is funny, the unnamed owner of the magazine, who we never get to see, but is this overarching power that can just take your dream away from you without even showing up, right? Like, they didn't even bother to give him his 2-week notice. They just let him go. But I don't think 2 week notice was a thing back then. Whatever.
It didn't even be a thing. Whatever.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, like, that's what it is. It's about the people who don't know why they don't like something. They just know they don't like that thing with the Black people there.
Yep.
And so,
or people that don't look like them. Period.
Yeah, and so DS9 / Far Beyond the Stars is talking about that. Like, it's showing you the examples that you should be able to recognize is happening. That's, it's not all just inward, right? It's like I was saying,
subtle. That's the thing.
Exactly. It's the subtleness. It's the microaggressions. Yep. Yeah. That they're wanting to point out that this is what racism looks like in this new era. And yeah.
Raina, your turn.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with Tia. And there's also a part in the episode where Pabst is, trying to so-called explain why, he can't pick up Benny's piece. And, he's like, well, these people aren't, folks are not going to use their hard-earned cash to talk about, read about a Black man in space or a Black captain. And it's like, No, they want to read about Superman. They want to read about, Captain America. They want something that fits their narrative of what should be and what should not. And they're controlling that. And that is happening still today. I mean, I don't want to even mention the new movie that just came out. That's a whole different conversation. But, there's a certain way in which you can control who sees what and what kind of narrative you want to portray. And that.
Which is getting into something important, in that, to take it back, right? At that point, he had already made the decision to go along with it's all a dream, right? Rather than making it this future's reality, he was willing to take the path of making the story be a dream of a white character just to get it out there. And that still wasn't enough.
Exactly.
And so here we are in this episode where, and it seems to be a theme in it. Like, he gets the joy of maybe getting his story published, and then no, that's not good enough. You can't have these dreams, and so I'm going to take it from you, and you better figure out something else to do with your time, right? Because we don't want to have this story of Black progress, because as the Odo character, Paps Blue Ribbon, sorry, PBR, that's what I'm going to call him. There we go. PBR is saying this is going to cause a race riot, right? This is just the idea of a Black person, a Black man leading I'm trying to think about a space station. Being a captain is enough to start the next race war, which is, I just got to chill, guys. I just got to chill. This is a Black moment. I'm sorry. I have to go to a side. You get a chill. That superstition about the grave. Oh, please don't walk over my grave. But anyway, that fear of allowing Black people to dream or to look to that future and have something is it's so dangerous to certain people that they will just rather not give you the means to do that at all. And so the idea of the dream and the dreamer is so important to this episode. We haven't really talked about the prophets yet, and I don't know if that's something we want to do.
Yeah, that's in the episode. I mean, we're running out of time.
There.
But we're getting there. T, are you done?
Oh yeah, my bad. Sorry, yeah.
So I wanted to kind of piggyback on one of the things that you said, Tia, was not even allowing Black people to dream or squashing any sort of hope that we may have. To me, that dates back to slavery times where they wouldn't even allow slaves to read.
Yes. Ooh.
Exactly. So it's like we don't want to give Black people any sort of means to progress or to think for themselves, because why? They want to control Black people. Because of people who are controlled are more likely to do what you want them to do. They're not going to revolt. They're not going to attack back. And so, yeah, I think that is a common thread within the episode of, making sure to keep Black people in a certain place. And then it also kind of, back to the opening sentence where he's like, I make progress, and then it all just turns into ashes. Raina, your thought next?
Yeah, I don't know if you were going to talk about this, but there was this specific section where Benny, basically he goes off and he's like, I'm tired of being calm. I think that was the main part that hit me as well, was I'm tired of being calm. Calm never got me a damn thing. I'm a human being, and you can't destroy this idea. It's, I created it. It's real. I think I almost like teared up in that, in that moment, because it just takes me back to something my mom always told me about my grandfather. It's like, they can't take away what you have in here. Okay. What you have, the knowledge that you've acquired what you have in your heart. And that future is real, you know, like it can be. And they'll try to take it from you is any way possible. And that goes for, from the job, from, society in general, even your own people. They'll tell you, you can't do this. Oh, you're not good enough. We're not those type of people. Well, no, keep dreaming. And it's real. Just keep working at it and find your people. That's the most important. I grew out of that, but that was an amazing acting skills. I mean, Avery is just Mr. Brooks.
We get into
We want you back.
Yeah, we do.
I just want to piggyback real quick off of what Raina said, because again, I just want to say how much I relate to Benny, because that is me. And I've been accused, even by other Black people, of having my heads in the cloud, not being, realistic, not being Black enough, and having people, are you sure you want to do that? In a way that's, condescending. And it's just so hard, sometimes for me to navigate Black only spaces, because I am that dreamer. I am that person that, I have hope for a better future for all of us, not just Black people, but for all people. But it's heavy sometimes when you have people who push back and say, no, that's not possible. And it's even more damaging when they look like you and they're supposed to be that support system, as in family and close friends. So, I, in that moment where he's talking about it, it's mine, it's real, you can't take it from me, I created it. That just all that emotion that came pouring out. I've been down that road before, but I just also want to say that it's something that kind of reflects on what it is Black people go through mentally and emotionally, having to deal with all these pressures and having to deal with, already we have to deal with ordinary life stuff, but then when you add on the racism, it's even more of a burden. And I want to say it was the whatever our national, like health, not the Department of Health, although it could have been the Department of Health. They recently said that, yes, racism is it's a public health issue, and it's a health issue in general for Black people, which is very true. Look at how it affects our mental health, which affects our physical health.
Okay, we are running a little low on time. So I don't know how you guys want to handle the rest of the questions. I'm going to choose the ones that I think are pertinent, so we can wrap up within the next 10-15 minutes. I'm going to do the one about Jake being shot. We see this on a regular basis now. It's 30 plus years later. He had a weapon, crowbar defense, but was shot by the cops. Briefly, and let's try to keep it at 5 minutes. What do we have any points that we want to bring out here? One of the things that stuck out to me was that the white cops, when Benny tried to intervene and see what was going on with Jimmy, the white cops are beating Benny up, but the Black cops are the ones that are holding back the Black crowd. So, and I think there's a bit of cultural significance here, but Grace, you have your hand raised to comment.
I don't know if I want to have this particular conversation again, the trauma, Black trauma as a plot device in the show. And Marisha was saying in the YouTube chat a little bit earlier that Jimmy didn't need to die. And I mean, that is true up to a point. I think that they could have had the same situation present itself and Jimmy maybe not die, or they could have had Benny come into another altercation with the cops as he did previously. But like, I see the point they're trying to make, that the violence had to escalate in order for us to get to the point where Benny is beaten and then he has his breakdown. Like, I see the escalation. I see the route that they took, but I don't like that that's what was necessary to get the point across. I don't need to watch more Black bodies, Black trauma in my Star Trek. So for me, I don't think it was necessary to show other people that are watching the show that may not get it. Like, I see the point that they're trying to make, but I didn't need to see that.
Does we have time for maybe one more other comment, and then we're gonna have to move on? Are y'all good? Okay, next one. Okay, we're back. We're going to discuss the final speech where Ben has come back into the office, and he says, "I'm tired of being calm. Calm never got me a damn thing. I'm a human being, damn it. Ben Sisko exists. You can't destroy an idea I created, and it's real." Grace, you have your hand up.
Well, yeah, because I have things to say. I'm sure other people do. I'm ready to wait my turn, but I definitely do have something to say.
The only one that has your hand up.
Okay, well, you have... No, somebody else should go. I feel like I'm taking up too much time.
Well, I mean,
Go ahead.
We talked about this. I skipped ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I skipped ahead too in what it was I wanted to say about this. So it's on you, Grace.
Again, like, you have, it's more Black trauma. I don't. No, somebody else go. I'm a hold. I'm gonna.
I'll say this much. I'll say this much. It's Black trauma for us because we are used to it, right? It gets to what Grace is saying, that this is probably written for the majority white Star Trek audience, where they don't have to look at this, where in their mind, because they can escape an hour into Star Trek, they don't have to. You know, it's what I was saying earlier. This is a way to saying this is what is happening outside of your little TV screen, your little box. And I'm going to show you, and I'm going to do it in something that you love. But it's also a way, like, to really hold up what Star Trek is supposed to be about. Right? It's not just the hope. It's the process of getting to that hope. And that's what Benny, the dreamer, and Sisko are. That's the connection between them. Benny dreams of the time that there is a Sisko, and Sisko gets to live in that dream. And so
I think,
that's... Yeah, go ahead.
It's more tone policing and respectability politics. You have him saying, I'm tired of being calm. Calm never got me anything. Because you want, like, other people, like, they're like, oh, well, you can say your piece, but you have to say it in a calm way for me to even consider your viewpoint. Like, no, I don't have to be calm. I'm angry that people are getting shot and killed around me for no reason at all. I don't have to be calm when I'm explaining that to you. It's not something that I should be calm about. But no, to keep you happy, to placate you, to make you comfortable, I have to do it in a calm way. Why? For what? For why?
Yeah. Exactly. And that's our experiences in spaces where we are the minority.
Yeah.
Right. We have to make ourselves less noticeable.
Yeah, we have to shrink ourselves.
We can't be who we are fully in these spaces. And that's something that this episode is trying to demonstrate in that time, in that moment.
Yeah, see, exactly.
It's frustrating, right? Which is why I said what I said in terms of, racism and everything like that being a health issue, because we have to do these things. We have to sit here and we have to jump through these mental hoops. We have to try and placate people so their feelings aren't hurt. And it's frustrating. It's tiresome. We're going through it. Our children are probably going to have to go through it. Our grandchildren are probably going to have to go through it, just as our grandparents did. and their great grandparents. So, you know, and in all honesty, I consider myself kind of lucky sometimes, because it's like, man, if this was even 50 years ago, would I have made it?
I know I wouldn't.
Me neither.
I would have been in trouble.
Oh, I talk way too much. I wouldn't have made it. I would not have made it.
No.
Okay, let's do our final question. We had to skip quite a bit, and I don't know if we want to take this to Twitter to
We can definitely
discuss.
do that.
We can, or maybe do a part 2. We'll see. So the final question is: Cisco is fighting for his work and his voice to be heard. How does this relate to the Black community in Star Trek today? I'm gonna go first.
I was gonna say, it's like, you better go first, because I know you have things to say about it.
That's all you, girl.
So to kind of wrap up everything in a bow, when you all said that we have to placate ourselves and be careful about what we say, I'm sick of that. And everybody knows that I'm sick of that. I do not like having to water myself down or tone myself down when it comes to my opinions about things. And if it wasn't for...
Don't blame me.
I want to say this in a nice way, but how did we all get here? We got here because somebody said, you know what, let's make some spaces for Black voices within Trek. And when that statement was made, it was fought back from the community. Like, why? Why do you need Black voices in Trek? You're making trouble. You're starting trouble. But when you have a Black voice within Trek, and we get to discuss this episode, we get to discuss these Black characters in a way that, quite frankly, nobody else can do. You know, we have a gift as Black people that we can see things in a different way. And that goes for anybody. You know, any person of color, you can look at something differently than what the standard white gaze is and say, you know what, as a Black person or as a Latinx, as an Asian, I can look at this and see something different. And I think I find a lot of beauty in our podcast. Even this particular episode, we've gone over 2 hours discussing this because we're able to give something from a Black perspective. Raina, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, and as you were saying, not only as in a Black perspective, but in a variety of perspectives, because we're all come from different parts of the country. We've all had different experiences. We all have different cultural backgrounds. Yet we can sit here and have it all cooked out and argue with each other and still be friendly and have conversations and discuss these things. I am really appreciative of this opportunity, of our listeners, for engaging with us, for even, and also for the criticisms. If you don't agree with something we say or something we've written, with respect, obviously, please come to us and we'll be more than happy to engage. But to shut the door on people and, make spaces not safe for other groups of people is not the world I want to live in. And that's not how I want to enjoy Star Trek.
Anybody else? I'm also checking our Twitter to see if we've got any.
That's literally how this whole thing came about. Someone decided they wanted to say, make your own. Okay,
and we did. Now
and
what?
Here's what's interesting.
Welcome to our 19th episode.
Yeah. Here's what's interesting though. At some point, someone's going to take issue as if we haven't had diverse people on our show already, because we have. And we do that because of the fact that we've been shut out of spaces, right? Mm-hmm. So, I just really, just it's hard for me to articulate it, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, like we always do as a community, we take nothing and make it into something.
Ooh. Yes.
I'm gonna say that again. We take
made
nothing
into a GIF.
we take nothing and make it into something. It's like Dave Chappelle said, we took chitlins, we put some hot sauce on them, and we learned to love them. Okay?
Not no more. Not no more.
We take the worst and we just roll with it. The community of Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma came from nothing. There was nothing there. White people weren't over there. So fast forward all these years later, and here we are. Fast forward 100 years later, and here we are. So, this is something that happened out of necessity as much as it happened out of our enjoyment of Star Trek.
And Grace has a comment, but really quick, I wanted to piggyback on what Dre said really fast, is bringing up Tulsa again. Our podcast has had a few haters, some negative things. And that to me it does relate back to that time, because Black people can create something from nothing. And then you have people who don't like that. And then they'll come and try to destroy it or badmouth it in one way or another. Grace, your point, your comment?
I'm just going to say, I take it as we're doing something right.
There you go. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
We're definitely fighting for our voices to be heard, and we'll continue to do so, because that's the kind of thing that we do. Like, we won't be silenced. We want people to hear what we have to say. And going back to the respectability politics, it's not so much like we're fed up. We don't want to say it nicely anymore, because we've been saying it nicely. Like, we can't protest peacefully. We can't have, our petitions, our sit-ins, our walkouts. Like, those things aren't working. So yes, we're getting more aggressive with it. We're getting a lot louder with it. We want our voices to be heard. Like, that's really all it is.
And don't take the silence as necessarily being complicit.
Like, also that, like, don't take the silence as us being complicit.
Yeah.
It's very important not only that we are speaking up, but that we're actually being heard. It's one thing for us to say, we don't want police brutality. We want equal voting rights. And you guys say, okay, those are the things you want. We're going to give you BLM painted on the street. We're going to give you Juneteenth as a holiday. I'm like, okay, those things are nice and those things are great, but that's not what we asked for. Like, right. You're hearing us, but are you listening to us? Like,
I like that.
Yes, but I do want to point out that the Juneteenth holiday thing was like a long fought by a Black woman.
It's a long time coming, yes. And Juneteenth holiday is great. But we still need, like, the voter reforms. Like, the voter reform bills, those still need to be passed. And I'm like, y'all may hate me for saying this, like, but I would have rather, even as a Canadian, I would have rather had the voter reform bill passed than Juneteenth as a holiday. Like, I would have rather had the voter reform first. It doesn't make sense to me that we're having Juneteenth as a holiday and they're not teaching critical race theory in schools. Like, how are you going to have Juneteenth as a holiday and not teach the children what Juneteenth is about?
That's what makes it performative and a slap in the face a little bit.
Like, you're hearing
there's no getting around that, and that's the elephant in the room, and that's the thing that has made so many Black people, especially online, kind of push back against it. And that's the thing. It's not that we're upset about getting Juneteenth as a holiday. Like, I heard that and I was so happy, and I was just like, they better not be making me come in and work overtime on the very first Juneteenth. I'm just gonna have to get in trouble at this white man's job. But anyway, I'll take it. Not gonna lie, I'll take it. It's a free pay holiday our future. It's a federal holiday, right? It's a holiday that, you get it off work, you should be getting paid for it. But anyway, I'll take it. I'll take the small victories and the large victories, just because it is what it is. But that doesn't mean that we're going to be complacent. It doesn't mean that the fight is over. Far from it. It's a small step towards hopefully more progress. Yeah.
Okay, so we should wrap up.
Yeah.
Anyone, I'm going to start with closing thoughts and then go around the room, so to speak. I appreciate everyone listening, for joining us today, for submitting questions, for retweeting our podcast, visiting the website, any way that you've supported us, donating. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. This podcast has very humble beginnings. A lot of you know how this podcast got started. And so from where we started to where we are is something that when I think about, I get really choked up. And so I just love you all. Thank everybody. And whoever wants to talk next can talk. Somebody say something.
I'm gonna go because everybody acting all like shy and shit right
I've
now.
been talking.
I've
So
been talking. What you talking about?
I'm just saying, like, that was a long pause. We've been talking the whole time. This is the first time that pause was that long. Anyway,
Okay.
thank you all for coming out and listening to us talk about Far Beyond the Stars. There's a lot more we could say, but, you know, these conversations shouldn't just be one-time things. So come to us on Twitter, drop us a line on our website, blackalertpodcast.com, and, you know, give us your thoughts, give us your feedback. We usually do, for the more long conversation episodes, we typically do 2 parts. So I wouldn't be surprised if we came back to discuss it again at some point. Not saying that that will be the next one. The next one that you folks will see on the internet will be episode 18, even though we're recording 19, will be about Benjamin Sisko, where we'll discuss some of the things we talked about here, among other things. And, you know, just thank you. Come to our website. We have one. Check out our episodes.
Shout out to Tia.
No. Oh.
Shout out to Tia for building the website from the bottom up.
Tia built the website, you guys, with
She did this whole LaCars layout that y'all are looking at. That was all her.
Definitely, I want to thank. Go ahead. Sorry, Dre. I apologize.
No, you can go ahead, Raina.
I just want to, Leslie, just, you know, thank those before us who got us here. Happy Pride. Okay. And
Yes.
Don't forget Pride. But and that's 365. This is Juneteenth, is one day, but being who you are as a person is every day. Your ups and downs, whatever. Yeah, be you. Don't be afraid. And we're here. This is a safe space. We can talk. We love y'all. Thank you very much for your support, and we'll talk soon.
Yep. I want to reiterate, you know, I'm very thankful for the support that we received, the viewers that we have on YouTube, the viewers that we have on Twitch, everybody who has liked, retweeted, commented on all our tweets today, not just on the Black Alert Podcast account, but on our individual Twitter accounts. Thank you. We appreciate all the interaction. After this, I personally can't speak for anybody else. I'll be going to Twitter to keep talking about Far Beyond the Stars. So please join me there. I look forward to any commentary or follow-up questions that we couldn't get to that you guys have. Please definitely keep interacting with us. We hope to keep this podcast going for a very long time. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, as always, I typically like to give a shout out at the end of all of our episodes. I've been doing that recently with shouting out all our listeners, and it's still that way today. Thanks so much for the support, because without you guys, we wouldn't have this platform. But we're still growing, and we have some things that we are planning in the future. So stay tuned. We have things in the works, you guys. So we're growing slowly but steadily. And like Grace said, I'm also I dropped in the YouTube chat my Twitter handle. And thanks so much for the support. Live long and prosper, and listen to Black people, hashtag leave Black women. I had to, okay? I
When-
told
Yes.
I told y'all I was gonna be black today. I told y'all. I told you.
No, one other small shout out. Tilly in the chat. Tilly in the chat is my sister. Family supporting family. Thank you for watching this. Even
Oh,
though
hi,
you listen to me
Grace's
rant
sister.
about Star Trek
Hi.
all the time, and it's your
Hi.
fault I'm in Star Trek in the first place. So thank you for that.
Oh wow. Okay, we have family show up. Hi y'all. How y'all doing?
That's what's up.
Family
Yeah.
and friends.
We stand and support a family.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
All right, y'all.
Thank you. Have a great night,
Bye, y'all.
everyone.
See y'all